how did you basically shape your own leadership style, and how is that evolving so that we know the person which is advocating this kind of servant leadership? Of course, yourself, you've been experimenting and practicing with it, and therefore just painting a picture about you, where it comes from, would be a good thing to get going, not?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be here today with all of you. Today I am the CEO of Ringier Axel Springer Media, which is a publisher in Central Eastern Europe, and it's a joint venture between the two big publishing groups in Germany, Axel Springer and Ringier in Switzerland. And my origin actually, being Austrian, I studied business with a finance focus. And I'm actually coming from, a very, very rational background, being a CFO before I became CEO. And I think that also shaped me a lot because, this rational background is one thing, but when you enter into a CEO role, you also have to switch, yeah? Whereas you have to be rather, the shepherd's dog, yeah? As a CFO, you have to be the shepherd as a CEO. And that is a transition I went through over the years, and with the experience of crises also I had to undergo in the work field. I also learned more and more how to navigate and how to reach out to people and to get people focused much more than in a former CFO role. And if you ask me, who has shaped my leadership? I mean, I always had the luck, I would say, that I had very good bosses. And I always, I think I'm a good observer. Yeah. So leadership at the end of the day is also about observing and learning from good experiences. Yeah. So whenever I felt motivated or I felt inspired by a certain leadership act, I noted that down. Yeah. And the same was when I was frustrated, yeah, or disappointed by a certain leadership act. I just put that on the don't do list. Yeah. And I think it's very much about observing, learning, and experiencing, and to develop from that also your own leadership guidebook.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I've said in the past on my own experience that out of, say, 5 bosses, that there was only 1 out of 5 that I truly felt showed an interest in me and was truly inspiring. I'm not sure if I was unfortunate, but if I would ask you the same question, Mark, I mean, did you consistently have good bosses, or did you have a mixed bag yourself too?
I mean, to be honest, I always had good bosses. But wow. I think it's also a choice, yeah, because you know the saying, yeah, you don't choose a job, you actually pick a boss. Yeah.
Good point.
And I think with that you have certain control on that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I mean it can happen that there are also people around you in peer positions of your boss or yep. The boss of the boss. And here I had also observations of very bad experiences. Yeah. But even this was insightful. Yeah, because to see what they did, what really frustrated people, that's just as important, if not the more important learning actually, what not to do as what to do.
Exactly. Hey, so final question on yourself. I mean, we all know that leadership is extremely demanding in terms of the time that you have to spend in it and so forth, and the many things that you need to do. What keeps you energized to be an athlete kind of leader, if I can call it like that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, taking care of myself has also been a journey. I mean, in my 30s, I was exploiting myself. I thought I don't need to take care of myself, and I put more and more on me. But I also had to learn that this has limits, and I gradually integrated routines in my life that helped me to also rebalance. So for me, in the beginning, running is a relief. It's something that balances me. Nature in general. So I love to go to the mountains, hiking. I love to go for a swim to the lake. Yeah. So that is really something where I get energy from. But, just recently, last year, I think everything has changed again. And the topic of rebalancing has become even more important. And since then, also my life has turned upside down, because I used to travel, 5 days a week, 4 to 5 days a week. And I was permanently on tour, and all of a sudden I'm locked down at home. Yeah. And it was actually a very positive experience for me, because for the first time I could really focus on routines. And I could integrate routines in my daily life. And also I saw the need, because sitting every day in front of the screen, and that's not so easy. So I have really worked a lot on that. And last year I started meditation. So I have really integrated that in my daily schedule. Every morning from 7 to 7:30, I do half an hour meditation. And on the days I don't do it, then I go to the gym twice a week. So that's important for me. Running from time to time. But also what I do during my daily routine in the office. So I don't have any meetings between 12 and 2. Yeah. So this is really work reserved for individual work, but also for lunch. And I try to go for a walk, 30 to 45 minutes, and also use the occasion to call someone and to do random calls to reach out to people during that time. So I'm very strict about that, to be honest. And that helps me to have a clear schedule, and also to stay balanced.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mark. Hey, so about last year then, of course, there were many changes, as you just said, in the way we work. And what has changed in you in the nature of work with your organization? Which are the big changes about the work rituals that you have seen, other than sitting behind the screen?
Well, I mean, everything has changed. Because we were no longer connected in the way we were connected. We had to find new ways of reaching out to each other, finding touch points of communication. We learned that the time together has to be planned very carefully, because I think previously we set meetings as we wanted to set meetings, and if they were inefficient, okay, they were inefficient. But in a remote setup, we realized, hey, I mean, we have anyhow so many meetings. It's also exhausting, much more exhausting to stay attentive and to have people engaged, that you need to put much more effort in making these meetings then really also compelling and engaging for the audience. And that is challenging you as a leader, because you have to be more an animator. You have to also put more thought. You have to be more planful. You have to be more disciplined. And this all you have to do without getting into the virus, which is called meetingitis, as you call it. And this is still something we are fighting against. And the ultimate vaccine hasn't been found yet. In our company at least, but we are getting better and better every day in doing so. But I think this is the challenge, and to also keep connected, to also find out what kind of tasks can be performed in the best possible setup. That is also something that has changed, because we all know, I mean, creativity is very much about serendipity. And it's about encounters, and not everything can be planned.
No, you got to engineer these. You got to engineer the serendipity. So moving on to the topic of leadership as a service. I mean, for those people that did not read the article yet in Forbes, I mean, spoiler alert, it covers 3 topics: trust, communications, and meaning. And Mark, I would like to dive into each of those quickly and listen to you. Direct question to you: what makes you trust people?
I mean, trust, that is a concept which can be perceived differently. So I work in Central Eastern Europe, and there trust has a completely different meaning or approach than we see in Western Europe. Yeah. I grew up in Austria, and in our culture circle, it's more about, if you don't know someone, you give trust, because you have no reason not to trust the person. Yeah.
Okay.
But what I learned in Central Eastern Europe, and also in Poland in particular, is for people, if I say I don't know the person, they say, I mean, I don't know the person. How can I trust the person? Yeah. So what I'd like to say is there's a difference between give trust first, or you have to earn the trust. Yeah. Because this is the concept what I see very often in Central Eastern Europe. That's the default. Yeah, to earn the trust, and that was for me as a leader also a challenge in the beginning. But I'm firm to my original position. Yeah, so I think trust is something you have to give first in order to get it. Yeah, and that makes you as a leader vulnerable, of course, because you might get disappointed. Yeah, but if I get disappointed, I withdraw it. And what makes me trust people concretely, I think there are different levels of trust. I mean, the first is the simple truth. If a person, it's true what the person is saying. Yeah, that's the first level of trust. Do I trust if the person tells me it's raining outside? Yeah, that's the first thing. Yeah, the second level of trust is about capability. I mean, I might trust a person that the person is telling the truth, but do I trust that the person is capable of doing something?
Yes.
So if I say, hey, I mean, I give you the project, and the person says, I will rock it. Yeah, I mean, do I trust that? Yeah, best efforts, but is the person really capable of doing it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Second level. And the third level of trust, that's the highest level of trust. This is when you entrust someone with your emotions, which makes you again even more vulnerable. Intimacy. And I think we all have in our surroundings different people, and we have different trust levels with them.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Hey, so then, did you tune your communication style over the last year compared to earlier?
Oh yes, I did. I think, particularly in a remote setup, you have to reference much more to the we. Yeah, it must. I think the communication must be much more uniting. You also have to reference much more to things which you cannot show in practice because you're not physically together. You have to reference actions to the values much more prominently. I think empathy is a very big topic. People need to see that you really genuinely care for them, because that is the topic of the topic. When there is fear out there of a virus and people are find themselves in a completely new work environment and do not know how to handle it and get stressed. I mean, they need to feel that the leaders and the management of the company really care to solve their problems and really care and listen also in which situation they are in and understand that. So I'm not mentioning that. That would just, that would definitely, I would say, endanger the relation you have with your employees.
Exactly. Care is very central in the value system, I understand. So then on the topic of meaning, I mean, you are extremely passionate, your team, about journalism the way it should be. I mean, can you just quickly articulate the kind of meaning banner that you are using in the company?
Well, I mean, we are a media company, and we operate in Central Eastern Europe, and their independent publishing is quite under attack, because not all rulers like independent journalists, criticizing them or unveiling things that are happening, and there's a lot of pressure. And our meaning is very simple, we get up every day to empower free decisions. Within the societies we operate in, and this is our banner. So we want to provide people with trustful, reliable, independent information on which they can base their decisions on, and decisions being multifold, being which party to vote, which leader to trust, which item to buy, which house to rent, which job to take. So we have simple or several service points for our audience, and whatever we do, we want to consult them in the best possible way. And that is something that resonates with our people, because when the crisis started, remember how much fake news there were around, and people didn't know anymore what to trust. So I think that was the moment when independent journalism was needed more than ever before. And we even saw that because we saw our paid content services in digital soaring. So for the first time, people were in many instances ready to pay for trusted content, on the internet, and usually they expect content for free. So that was also for us a game-changing moment.
What a year. What a year. Hey, so leadership, Mark, as we all know, is there at different level? It's at your level, it's your executive circle, it's people managers, and it's then leading yourself. On that topic, I remember you saying to me, this is going to be a journey of multiple years, right? So I'm not jumping into this year, 2021. I'm sure that the audience will be quite curious to see how you go about developing people, assessing where they are, where are the biggest challenges in making sure that everybody, appreciates what leadership as a service is, and then gets supported in progressing towards that. What's on the plan for 2021?
Look, we work on all levels, we have to work on the self. Everyone has to work on himself, herself, how to really balance out well-being, but also applying servant leadership tools. I work a lot with our exec team. So this is a group of 40, 50 key leaders in the company. And we help them by doing energy audits. How can they better, balance themselves? We also did with them a survey where we basically tested their remote leadership skills and derived from that development needs and give them support, dedicated support on that. So I think that's what we do for the leaders. And at the same time, we have a comprehensive program which is not only about well-being and health, but also about remote work for the entire staff, where we in workshops are really passing on best practice knowledge. And we really see also the investment we did into this last year very fruitful, because we went very early on the learning curve. We said, okay, this kind of remote work, it's not going to disappear. To some extent, it will stay with us. And the more important is to equip the people with the right tools. And since we did that very consistently, also with your help, Philip, and many other external advisors also, which we brought to the company, we see that our people are actually doing very well in this environment and getting better and better. And that is encouraging.
Good. Hey, I have more questions, but I'll stop here, Mark. Thanks, because I want to open to the floor. And Ben is the person which is going to point the questions that came in the chat box to you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Absolutely. Thanks, Philip. So the first question, Mark, and I should say also from my perspective, thank you. That was really insightful. I love the differences in some of the cultures you've seen, the cultural approaches to trust. Really interesting idea as well to do some targeted learning for different types of leaders and how capable they are at doing remote management. So I really enjoyed those concepts. Thank you. I've got a question came in which was around politics. And the question is, how can you apply the concept of servant leadership to politics? Specifically, would it apply to a serving prime minister in the same way that it applies to a leader in a business?
Well, I think there are actually there are examples of servant leaders in politics. And if you look around, of course, there are ego-driven politicians who just care about themselves. I don't have to mention the name; you all know who I mean. But at the same time, there are also politicians who have been in power for 16, 20 years and scandal-free. And they've also always put the interest of the public in the front of their activity. And I think particularly in politics, servant leadership is a model that would do democracy very, very well.
Absolutely, I agree. So Mark, another question. Servant leadership is about long-term and sustainable approach and building up that trust with the workforce. So the question is, due to the COVID pandemic, suddenly many of us are thrown into a new way of working, forced to work from home all the time. So we're physically separated and people have very busy agendas. Does servant leadership still work under that model, or do you need to adapt your leadership towards a different style?
In a remote, whether servant leadership works in a remote-centric environment?
Yeah, does it still work just as well when everyone's very busy and they're not they don't have the physical face-to-face touch points?
Well, I would answer it's the only way of leadership that works in a remote-centric environment, and for a very simple reason. I mean, a servant leadership is the opposite of an hierarchical model. Yeah, it's the opposite of an ego-driven model. Yeah, it's also a model which is much more leaning into humility. Yeah, of where you see as a leader your role to support others, and just look at it. I mean, first of all, it starts with the trust. Yeah, so a hierarchical leader who is micromanaging. I mean, do you think you can micromanage the complexity of a remote setup? I think it's impossible. Yeah. So at the end of the day, you have to trust that people do what they're supposed to do, and you have to give them the trust. And then I think the likelihood of getting a positive outcome is much higher than if you instruct them what to do and you monitor them on every step. Yeah. Because they switch off the camera and might maybe do rather this year. Yeah. And that would be very difficult. Yeah. But it's not only about that. I think servant leadership also means to really understand the feelings of the organization and the pulse. Yeah? So you need to do regular pulse checks, and that's much more difficult because you don't see the stuff. I mean, yesterday I initiated something for the first time in my leadership circle with these 40, 50 directors. So I asked via Slido 2 questions. Yeah? The first question is, how do you feel? Yeah, and it ranges from never been better to miserable. And the second question is, how is your current workload? Yeah, over the edge to I'm almost bored. Yeah, and it was really interesting to see that because people honestly answered because it was anonymous, and then you can get a feeling also. Okay, how is my leadership circle actually doing in this situation? And that is so important because if you don't see them, if you're not in touch, and you don't have these feedback loops. Then you might oversee something and you risk that your organization fades away and burns out and you disconnect from them.
Absolutely. And Mark, I think we have time for just the one last question, but feeding off that previous answer, I see you've made reference to feedback loops quite a lot. So you have testing where you are with your leadership team, testing their capabilities to manage remote workers. And I think that maybe would be one of your key pieces of advice that we could take away from today. Would there be any other pieces of advice for those who want to establish servant leadership, want to strengthen their servant leadership skills as it relates at the moment, particularly to lockdown? What would you advise them to do? What are the first steps?
Well, I think the first step is really understanding the situation your people are in, yeah, and trying to put yourself in their shoes, yeah, because that is the prerequisite of empathy, yeah, to really understand another person's perspective and to derive from that actually the measures you have to take. And to do this, use the tools, do surveys, do polls. Yeah, you need to have those pulse checks, and you need to organize that. Yeah, it's not going to happen if you don't organize it. Everything needs to be much more planned. But I think that is the most important starting point. Understand how your people are feeling and how they are doing.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, thank you again for speaking to us. I know you're a busy guy and you've got to leave in just a moment. Last point, though, I believe you've got another article coming out in Forbes in April edition. Is that right? Should we look out for that?
Yes, I'm working on that, and it will be, remote work the year after. Yeah. So let's see how far we got. Yeah. And I will really explore also, our journey there, but also ramp up and put together what other companies have done in the meantime and where this all is heading.
Looking forward to that. Thank you.